Assume we're live. So, good morning. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're enjoying your time with your family and being in isolation. And if you're not, I'm hoping today I can give you some ways to make things better for you. So, first I want to do a little recap of things that I talked about last time on home educating and about getting the big picture, thinking long-term. And I don't mean long-term like, are we going to be doing this for the next 6 weeks? I mean like long-term in your kid's life, like the next 10, 15 years. What's going to really matter that you did with them now that's going to have an impact on their lives later? And I had said before that schoolwork really isn't going to be the thing, okay? Although it is important to get their work done. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and ways that you can make their education at home a little fun and even more enjoyable for you. But I also want to talk about some other things that I really think are more important during this time. All these things are important, but there are some other things that are really important with parents and their kids right now that I'm hoping I can shed some light on. And for the Christian parents and even other parents who will see this video, these are things that you are aware of in your children. We want to instill good character traits in our children. And that's kind of what I'm going to talk about today. Okay. First of all, I'm wondering how you're doing. How are you? What have you been up to? Tell me some of the things you're doing right now. Even if you're not on here live, I'll still be looking at the comments later. So put in the comments what you've been up to. Any ideas you might have that you'd like to share with us. Any ways that you might be discouraged. Please feel free to share those in the comments. And if you have prayer requests, I will pray for you as well. I am going to just have a quick word of prayer now and then get going. Father God, I thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to these ladies and for whoever may listen to this video, mothers and fathers alike. I pray, God, that this will be encouraging, Lord, and that your word will go forth and that families will be built strong during this time. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, I have a little piece of paper here that something I copied off the internet that I'd seen floating around on Facebook. And when I read it, I immediately loved it because I thought this is exactly right. This is the kind of thing that I am thinking about. Hi, Maureen. I'm going to wave to you. So good that you've joined me this morning. Hope you're doing okay. So what I'm going to read to you is a child's perspective of the COVID-19 pandemic. Actually, not just a child's perspective, it's a parent and child's perspective 10 years from now. So imagine it is now 2030 and an 18-year-old talks to their parents about this COVID-19 pandemic that happened in 2020. And they know it was really bad, and then they just want to find out what their parents remember about it. So the parent says, well, everything was shut down in an attempt to kill the virus, but not everyone followed the order to quarantine for 15 days. So it lasted longer than anyone expected. Many people died who shouldn't have. Grocery stores were out of everything because people were hoarding as much as they could. We were scared of economic failure for our country and for ourselves because we couldn't work. Don't you remember it? You were 8 years old. Well, this child, now a college student, says, all I remember was the school closing and being homeschooled. I remember doing scavenger hunts in our garden. I remember eating meals as a family for a change. I remember getting great sleep because I wasn't up late doing homework or getting up early for school. I remember board games as a family. I remember watching our pastor on our laptop. Honestly, it was the happiest time of my childhood. When I read that, it immediately made me think of something that my son did, a project that he did a couple years ago. He had to call his grandparents and ask them things about their life, and historical events that happened and what it was like for their family during that time. And when he called my mother, who will be 90 years old at the end of April, he called my mom and asked her about her childhood. And they talked about what it was like during World War II. And that has often been called the greatest generation, right? Because the people who lived during that time, who fought during that time, the families, the workers, all the people who came together to solidify freedom for our countries. And for us to enjoy even now in our future. Their future is now, right? And we're enjoying the benefit of what they did back then. My mother talked about that time, and at the time she would have been an early teenager, like 12, 13, 14 years old. And she knew it was hard. She knew there wasn't a lot of food. It was a scary time. But you know what she really remembers about it? She remembers it being a good time in her childhood because she spent so much time with her family. Of course, back then they had lots of meals. They always had meals together anyway. But it was a special time for them of bonding, meals, and games, and seeing friends, and doing things that you wouldn't think would be happening during a wartime, right? And yet that's what she remembers because her family life was all that she had. She didn't see the big picture of everything going on around her. She heard about it and she knew about it, but that's not what affected her on her day-to-day life necessarily. It was the events with her family. And we are now in that situation with our own families. Your children, my children, what they're going to remember when they are adults is they're going to remember what we did during this time, what our relationships were like, how we treated each other, and how we spent our days. So these are important things for you to think about. So again, if you go from the big picture, bring it down to today, what can we do to make an impact? So we have lots of things we might want to have to accomplish with our children, right? If you have children, you're doing your schoolwork, their schoolwork, and then your other responsibilities, it might seem like a very daunting task. But I want to encourage you to have the right perspective, okay? That's what that little paper was I just read about. It was about perspective. The parents, when they talked about it 10 years later, they were talking about all the problems and the hardships and how difficult it was. And the children, when they talked about it, they remember all the good, positive things came out of it. And we have the opportunity to instill that in our kids. So the first thought, I'd look up the word perspective. Perspective has different meanings. It's a particular attitude towards or way of regarding something, a point of view. It's to think about something in a wise and reasonable way. It's to compare something to other things so that it can be accurately and fairly judged. So our perspective is important. Our perspective matters. And perspective isn't always positive. Sometimes we have a negative perspective and a positive perspective. We have a choice to make. And so I want to encourage you to have a good perspective, a positive perspective on our situation today, okay? God has a lot to say about the way we think and how we see things, right? And you might immediately think of the verse in Proverbs 23, where 7, where it talks about, as a man thinketh, so is he. And that is true. Our thoughts determine how we are, right? It determines a lot about us. Yesterday, if you watched Gail's video, she talked about the importance of practicing capturing our thoughts. Because it says in 2 Corinthians 10:5, taking every thought captive. And that's really what this is about, that I'm talking about as well. Our perspective. We need to take hold of our thoughts and determine how we're going to think about our everyday responsibilities, how we think about the long term of what we're doing right now. And when I say long term now, I do mean the next 4, 6, 8 weeks, whatever longer it's going to be. We need to choose now how we're going to think. And if you didn't see Gail's video, I encourage you to go back and look at it because she really gives us some practical ways to capture our thoughts. And then once you capture them, what to do with them. That really is important. And I encourage you to go back and to listen to what she has to say and the scripture she shares with you to encourage you to do what is best for you mentally and to do what's best for your family. Okay? Our thoughts are powerful. Right? They do affect our attitudes. They don't only affect our attitudes, but they also affect the attitudes of the people around us. And most of us are trapped in our houses with our family now. And you know that attitudes affect other people because your children's attitudes affect you, right? Your husband's attitude affects you. And therefore your attitude is going to affect your husband, your wife, your children, and whoever else is in your house with you right now. So it's really important for us to be careful about our attitudes and to be intentional with the way we think. Now, I want to ask you this question. How do you think? Are you a pessimist or are you an optimist? Do you see the glass half empty, half full? Do you tend to see the negative first or do you tend to see the positive first? Think about the way you think. Now, if you're not sure, you could always ask your spouse, or your partner, am I positive person or a negative person? Now, it might be a dangerous thing to ask too, but even asking that question of yourself, it might pop in your head what the truth is, right? Be honest with yourself. What kind of person are you? Okay. Now, the next thing I want you to think about is, why are you the way you are? Now, it actually stems from two different things, okay? And people like to blame these things for the way we think. One, we might say, well, this is my personality. This is just the way I am. Or two, we might realize, this is how my parents think. This is how my siblings think. This is the way our family is. And those two things do have big factors in how we think, right? And it's true that the way your parents think, you might think a lot like them. The way your siblings are, you all might think alike, because the way you're raised is how we think, right? But we don't have to stay that way. So if you find yourself being negative or having the kind of thoughts that are not helpful to you, you have a choice to make. But the biggest choice you have to make is how you're going to impact your family. How are you going to raise your children? Because your children are going to grow up and have a lot of the perceptions that you have. They're going to think a lot of the ways that you think. Their personalities will, of course, still come up, and they might be different in other ways, but a lot of their opinions and perspectives are going to come from you and the things that you've instilled in them. So that's some of the things I wanted to talk about with you this morning. I picked two things that I actually wanted to focus on. And the two things are instilling thankfulness into your children and also contentment. As I've been talking to people from my church and even my family, I think one thing that people are struggling with is being thankful during this time. Especially when we're afraid and things are uncertain, it's hard to be thankful unless you do it intentionally. And the other thing is, we struggle with being content. We are used to our freedom. We're used to being able to go and doing what we want and eating where we want and seeing who we want, right? And now all those things have been taken away from us. And sometimes we might find ourselves being very discontent. And so I want to encourage you, if you're feeling that way, let's have a change of mind, okay? And I'm going to give you some strategies for doing that. I told you before, I've been reading from this book, Sacred Motives, by Paul Chappell. And so again, yesterday I read strategy or sacred motive number 7, okay? Sacred motive number 7 was about the next generation. Okay, now I'll read to you again for those of you who may not have heard me talk about this book. It's called Sacred Motives, 10 Reasons to Wake Up Tomorrow and Live for God. I just love that title, because as a Christian, I'm thinking, do I need a motive tomorrow to wake up for God? But I know actually during this time, people are struggling, right? And so motive number 7 has to do with the generation that follows me and the generation that follows you. That is why it is important for us to carry on with our faith, okay? So your people, your little people that are in your home, we often call them our mini me's, right? And that is what they are. They are like us, right? They're our little followers, What are they getting from you? What are they learning from you? And you may have heard this phrase before, that more is caught than taught. And I remember the first time I heard that. More is caught than taught. We teach. We want them to learn things from us. But really what they're learning the most from us as parents is what they're catching from us in our attitudes, the way we react to things, the way we handle situations, the way we talk, the way we complain, the way maybe we don't complain, the way we show our thankfulness and gratitude and contentment. Our children are catching these kinds of things from us. And so maybe sometime today you can take a little survey of yourself in this way and think, what are my children catching from me? What do they see? Because whether you realize it or not, your children are always watching. And they don't even realize it. It's just what they do. They are watching and they are listening and they are learning how they are to handle and respond to things. So with that in mind, I want to read a little bit from this book. I'm going to go to page 70. And this is what he says, okay? And I know later there'll be different people watching this. So a lot of things I'll be talking about, of course, are for my Christian ladies that I'm speaking to right now. But I know this is applicable to all walks of life. This is what this says. The same could be said of the Christian faith. Now, he had gone on talking about, even in this book, the greatest generation and their attitude about freedom and working hard and getting through the war, right? And the same thing can be said about the Christian faith. You can't pass it along in the bloodstream. It doesn't show up in your hearts or lives by osmosis. It must be fought for, intentionally transferred, and deeply implanted into our children's hearts by faithful Christian followers who lead the way. You know, your children aren't going to have godly Christian values just because, that's just what happens. No, you have to instill it. You have to teach it. It has to be an intentional act on your part to show these qualities to your children and also help them to understand them and to practice them. Okay? So I really appreciated Pastor Chappell saying that. And then he goes on and talks about core values that we must pass on. Some of the things he talks about are things that we know, right? We must uplift sound doctrine, what the scriptures say. We must model Christian teamwork. We must strive for biblical balance in our homes and in our ministries. We must maintain sincere approachability. In your home, do your children feel they can come talk to you about things? That's really important. I think sometimes people in the church feel like they have better access to the pastor's wife than maybe the children do. That's something that we can work on today. We must model consistent soul winning and discipleship. We must cultivate hearts for God, and we must model Christian living. And there's two more. We must lovingly lead our families, and we must walk in the Spirit. These are all true things, right? These are things that we need to practice every day. And even for many of us, it doesn't just happen for us either, right? A choice has to be made. We need to intentionally think about these things that we are doing every day, our actions, the way we speak, and then make a choice to do what God says and teach our children to do what God says as well, right? And the last thing I want to read from this book, he says, take the long view. And I love that because really in my head, I've been thinking a lot about that as you already know, I've been talking about the long view. He says, purposefully implanting these core values in the next generation, which is our children, requires diligence, sacrifice, persistence, and faith. Much of the investment we make into young people only bears fruit years after the initial seeds are sown. I can remember so many times when my children were younger, giving them a job to do and showing them how to do it. This is what you need to do. This is your job now, and then next day they're not doing it right again. A few days later, after we've been doing it all week, they still aren't doing it right. And sometimes it can be frustrating. You're thinking they're never going to learn. They're never going to do it, but they will learn. It's really funny because I have a rule about the dishwasher in my house. I am the only one that loads my dishwasher because I am one of those people that there is a right way and a wrong way to load a dishwasher, at least for me. So I like to load the dishwasher. And then my children get to unload it. So I do it at night. They all go to bed. I clean the kitchen, load it all up. And then the next day in the morning, their job is to unload it. Now, I didn't have a dishwasher until really probably, 5 or 6 years ago when I first had my first dishwasher. Maybe a little longer than that. It was probably longer than that now. I've been living here for 8 years. And when I came here, I had a dishwasher. So Damien Jr., that was his job, to get to unload the dishwasher. And I always thought, if I teach him, if I load it properly, it's going to get in his head as he unloads it how to do it properly. And I've told people that and they thought that's crazy. That doesn't work. But you know what? I think it has worked because now sometimes Damien Jr. is up later than I am. And he's like, I'll do the dishwasher. So a few nights ago, I was like really tired. And I'm like, I'm just going to let him load the dishwasher. And you know what? In the morning, I took a peek in there just to see what he did. And it was very similar to the way I would have loaded it. And I thought, years ago, I would have never thought, to let him load the dishwasher because he didn't know how to do it. But now he has learned from what I do. Not that there's only one way to do something. But it was just interesting to see that he kind of picked up on my preference to doing that job. And, it came from, I think, consistently every day. That was his job, to unload the dishwasher, do your job, put the things away. And sometimes kids don't always get it right. When he did that, he didn't always put everything in the right place, and I had to show him how to do it right, And that's what you're doing with your children. Whatever task it is you have, that was just one example. There's lots of things you might have your children do. And even their schoolwork, when they're doing their work, they're not going to get it right the first time. And it's hard as a parent when we're teaching our children their lessons. We still tend to be the parent, and sometimes we have an emotional response to their work and when they get something wrong. Where a teacher is less likely to have that kind of response because they are a teacher and they know this is their student. So therefore they tend to have more patience and understanding with them when they're working with them. So I want to encourage you to exhibit patience and understanding and long suffering for your children, even while you're doing schoolwork with them. Because all these ways, no matter what you're doing throughout the day, your children are learning from the characters that you exhibit. Okay? Now, I do want to talk about, again, the importance of these character qualities. In this book that I was reading, he pointed out a story about Hezekiah. And I thought, oh, Hezekiah, I know that story. And it's in Hezekiah, the story of Hezekiah, King Hezekiah, is in 2 Kings chapter 20. So I'm going to read a little bit of this story to you, okay? 2 Kings chapter 20 says, "In those days was Hezekiah sick unto death, and the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amoz, came to him and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Set thine house in order, for thou shalt die and not live. Then he turned his face to the wall and prayed unto the Lord, saying, I beseech thee, O Lord, remember now how I have walked before thee in truth and with a perfect heart, and have done that which is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept sore. And it came to pass afore Isaiah was gone out into the middle court, that the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Turn again, and tell Hezekiah the captain of my people, Thus saith the Lord, the God of David thy father, I have heard thy prayer, I have seen thy tears. Behold, I will heal thee. On the third day thou shalt go up unto the house of the Lord." And the story carries on, and if you know the story, you know what happens. That Hezekiah was healed and he was given longer life, right? But then in the end, at the end of that chapter, we come to the time when Hezekiah does pass away. It's in chapter 20, 2 Kings chapter 20, verse 21 says, And Hezekiah slept with his fathers, and Manasseh, his son, reigned in his stead. Now, if you listen to what was said about Hezekiah, he was a godly man. He loved God. He followed God. He was even there with the prophet, making a request for God, and God honored him and answered his prayer. So now we know this was a godly man, a man who believed in God, who served God, right? And now, once he's dead, his son, who's been living in his house, is now coming to reign. Now listen to what happens with his son. It says, Manasseh was 12 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 55 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hephzibah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, after the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. For he built up again the high places which Hezekiah his father had destroyed. And he reared up altars for Baal, and made a grove, as did Ahab, king of Israel, and worshipped all the hosts of heaven, and served them. You see, he had a godly father, but somehow his father's belief and faith and character was not passed on to his son. And I think the reason for that could be, that he maybe was too involved in so many other things that he didn't realize he needed to take the time to directly and intentionally teach his son. And so with us being home with our children more now and being able to have the opportunity to teach them, I want to encourage you to take this time to focus on character qualities, okay? And there are two that I really want to focus on. But I'm first going to start with how you can get there, okay? And again, I'm going to recommend another book to you. It's the same book I recommended before, Seasons of a Mother's Heart by Sally Clarkson. This is an excellent book. It is an excellent book for you right now because you are of a season of parenthood that you never expected to be in. But just because you're in a season that you weren't ready for, it doesn't mean you can't come through it beautifully and having gained so much from it, okay? And the first thing she talks about in there is talking about celebrating life. And we need to be celebrating life right now. The fact that we do have life. The fact that we are where God has us right now. Whether we like it or not, it may not be of our choosing. And for most of us, it's not. But you know what? God has chosen it for us. This is the life God has given us to live today during this time. And it really is a blessing. And it's time for us to celebrate and to appreciate what God's given us. Now, how do we do that? First of all, it has to do with our perspective. How are we going to wake up and see every day? How are we going to address and work with our children every day? You know, having a rhythm and rhyme to your day is so important. You know, maybe when your kids first came home and you weren't prepared for them to be there, you didn't have a schedule. You didn't have a plan for the day. And all of a sudden you're like, the laundry's piling up. The rooms are filthy. I don't have time to get anything done. I can't even get a meal cooked because the kids are running around in the afternoon. There might be so many things that are keeping you from having what would be a normal rhythm in the home. But I want to encourage you tonight, once your children are in bed, sit down with a pad of paper and write down the things that are important for you to get done during the day. You know, maybe it really is driving you nuts that the toys aren't put away properly. Or maybe, you know, the bathrooms haven't been cleaned. Or maybe there's the laundry pile. There might be something that you're like, I really need to get this taken care of. You know, because what happens is we can ignore things. But if it's something that's important to us, it stays in the back of our mind. And it's affecting us, nagging at us. Get that done. You know, I want to encourage you, make a list. Choose your priorities. You're not going to be able to do everything. We're not superwomen. But you can get some things done. And then when you look at your list, make 4 or 5 things maybe. Then see what things you can have your children help with. You know, if you have laundry to do and it's all in one big basket, guess what? Those little ones can practice separating colors, right? They can at least separate the dark from the light. And believe it or not, even in the process of that, they're learning. They are learning something. So you can let them help you with that. And again, there's just other ways that if you evaluate your priorities and what you need to get done, I bet a lot of those things you can get your children to help you with, okay? So that will be a load off your mind. Second thing you probably should do on that list is evaluate how you're getting schoolwork done. Do you feel like you are satisfied with where you're at? Now, I had said before, you could do nothing for the next month school-wise and your kids will be perfectly fine. And that is still true. However, you don't want to spend your days, you know, wasting them away when really there's plenty of time to get that schoolwork done too, right? So, set aside a time that you know this is when we're going to do school. We're going to sit down and get some lessons done. Now, for the ones who do have schoolwork from their teachers, you probably have worksheets. Maybe you have websites they need to visit, things like that. I really don't know what kind of work teachers are having children do. Okay, I've only heard complaints of, they have given me so much for me to do with my child, I can't do it. Or I've heard some say, I don't know, they've given me nothing. So I think there's a wide spectrum of things that are being expected. But if you are someone who has work that's been given to you by the teachers, I want to encourage you again not to be anxious or worried about it. Work systematically through it. Help your child. Don't expect them to be able to, some things they can do on their own, but don't expect them to learn things on their own. They're going to need you to explain it, to read it with them. And then once you've gotten an adequate amount of that done, again, you're not going to spend hours and hours. You're going to maybe spend an hour or two, and not at one time. Little ones, 20 minutes or so. When you have children over 5, you'll probably can get maybe 30, 40 minutes at a time. But remember, doing work at home is different than working at school. So it's just not realistic to have your children sit for 2 hours and think they're going to, they might sit there and do it, but I don't know how much they're going to remember and glean from it. And the important thing is, if you're going to have them do things, you want it to benefit them, okay? And I'm diverging a little bit now, but I'm just going to go into some fun things you can do with your kids that'll help to make your day a bit more joyful, okay? The 3 things that are always important to remember: reading, writing, arithmetic. The 3 R's. Those are the most important things, okay? Readers need to continue reading, right? And they can read to you, they can read to siblings, but it's really important for you to read to them. Find a good book. There's lots of audio books. If you go online and look for free resources, there are places that are offering free books. The libraries actually have a system, I think it's called Drive, I'm not sure, where you can get audiobooks through the library for free. So if you have a library card, go to your library's website and look for audiobooks, and you'll find that you'll be able to get some through there that you can have played, and you and your children can listen to someone else reading. That can be very fun. Some of them are dramatic readings and they're very interesting. And don't just do a chapter. You have time. Do a chapter or 2 or 3. Let them really get into it. And when you see them getting restless and fidgeting and needing to do something else, then give them something else to do. For your little ones, let them play with their blocks while they're listening. Yep, things going good. Husband's checking on me, make sure we're working okay now. Anyway, let them play with their blocks. They can do that and listen, But if you really want them just to sit and concentrate, just make sure it's a reasonable amount of time that they can handle, okay? Because you want it to be an enjoyable experience. Next thing, games are a great thing. I didn't talk a lot about that last time, but I actually have a whole bunch of games here. I have, first of all, Monopoly. I think almost every household has Monopoly. This is a great game to play with your kids. And listen, if you don't like Monopoly, I'll be honest with you, I am not a Monopoly fan, mostly because I live with a house full of, well, I call them psychos, but all they want to do is win, which I like to play a game to win too, but I also like to play a game for enjoyment. We can take a Monopoly game that usually should last an hour or more, and they can be done with it in 20 minutes because they are buying everything and, it just drives me crazy. So Monopoly is not my favorite game. But inside the Monopoly game, even if you don't want to play it, there's some great resources. Look at this, all this money that is in the Monopoly game. All of a sudden you have tools for your little ones to count by ones, right? Or count by, your older ones might be counting by fives, right? Or counting by 10s, 20s. Use these tools. These are now teaching tools for you, okay? This is what I would do. Now I'm one of those kind of homeschoolers that if I can get the stuff that's made for homeschool, I would do it. I would get the stuff I could, but I couldn't always afford all those things. And for you who homeschooling is a temporary situation, you don't need to go buy a bunch of resources. You have a bunch of resources. You already have money for them to count. If you have a Yahtzee game, Yahtzee is an excellent math game. Play Yahtzee with your children, and it might require a bit of patience for them to do the scoring, but don't score for them. Have them do it. When they have their dice, dice, they have all the numbers on them, right? If you don't even want to play the Yahtzee game, you can take dice and throw two at a time and have them practice quick addition, adding the numbers that show up. If they're into multiplication, have them roll the dice and practice multiplying, okay? Lots of things you can do with the parts of games, okay? Another one that's really good, that's fun for math, is dominoes. Now, if you have some dominoes in your house, these are great for using for, I have flashcards. Like I said, I like the tools. So I have flashcards and things for my kids to use when they were younger, when they learn addition and subtraction and multiplication and division. But you can use these. What's 5 times 2, right? What's 2 plus 3? You can use these as math tools. And the great thing about it is your children, they think they're playing a game. They're not realizing, don't tell them we're going to do math now. This is no, you're going to play dominoes, but we're going to do it in a different way, right? We are going to use the dice. Where's that Yahtzee game? Let's use the dice and play a different kind of game. Make them all into a game. And not all learning has to be fun. Not all learning is fun. Sometimes it's just work that has to be done. But when you can make it fun and exciting and something you're doing with your child, do it. What harm is there in doing that? Now, another thing, again, reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? With that reading comes vocabulary and spelling. And if you have a Scrabble game, you could play Scrabble with your children. I know it can be painful. I have played Scrabble with all my children. Matter of fact, recently, my older son beat me astoundingly. Matter of fact, I remember the first time he beat me. I think he was like 18 years old, and he beat me with the vampire word. I was like, really? I was upset. I was actually really proud, thinking, yes, he can spell and he can think. But if you are not up to playing Scrabble with your children, you can use the letters, okay? If they have spelling words, for the little ones, this is what I would do for little ones. When I say little, I'm usually talking 7, 5, under, that age range. They're doing spelling. Take out the letters, if they have bigger words, if they're trying to spell, I don't know, if they're doing house and mouse and all those kind of things, get out those specific letters, mix them up, and say it's a bunch of words like house, mouse, and all the rhyming words. Pick out all the letters that go with it with the different beginning sounds, put them in a pile, and say, okay, I'm going to say a word and you spell it real quick. And let them go through the letters and spell the word, right? And go through their spelling list and just take out the letters that are in here. Now, if you have older children, 8, 9, 10, you could give them this whole bag. and make them find their own letters and then spell the words, okay? But I encourage you to do that. Practice these kind of skills with them as a game. Make it fun. They're still learning. They're learning their vocabulary words or their spelling words. Even older ones, that 8, 9, 10 range again, 11, if they have vocabulary words, you could actually just tell them the definition and then let them get the tiles to spell the word for that. And then that way, they are practicing their vocabulary, but they're also practicing their spelling, which is really great. So that's just a few of the ideas I have for learning activities for you. But again, back to our attitude and character. By doing this and making it fun, you're showing them that we can have joy even during this hard time, okay? Now, 2 other things I want to talk about before I go. I want to talk about specifically are being thankful and being content with our situation, okay? Now, thankfulness. I'm going to give you another little, I call these spilled milk instances or spilled milk illustrations. You know, sometimes things don't go the way we want them to go, okay? Sometimes our children make a mess, right? Quite by accident, you know, or they might be enjoying a situation in a time when you're expecting something else. But I'll give you an example of that, okay? In this book I've been reading by Sally Clarkson, she gives this story about how her children had made a huge mess in the living room. All the toys were everywhere. And she came in, it looked like a bomb had gone off. And she was so upset that she said, I am going to go next door to see our neighbor. And when I come back, I expect this living room to be cleaned up. So she comes back, and none of her children are to be seen, and the mess is still there, and she is quite upset about it. And then, while she's fuming, she hears laughter in the bedroom. So not only have her kids disobeyed her, but now they're having fun in another room. So she goes marching to the other room and looks in, and one of her children turns, oblivious to the mother's anger, and says, look, baby Joy is learning to put her foot in her mouth. And Sally says, in that moment, when she really just wanted to say, I don't care about that, I told you to go do this, in that split second, she realized, this is a special moment. I don't have to be angry right now. And she turned and enjoyed with her children what they were enjoying about their baby sister. And I thought, you know, how wonderful that is. That was a moment when things could have really gone south, right? They could have been bad. And she chose joy in that instant. Did it mean the children weren't still in trouble for disobeying? No. Did it mean that they didn't have to go clean up their mess? No. But for that second in time, she could appreciate the joy they were experiencing and what was going on, and then move on from there. And you know, sometimes when we take that minute to laugh, whether we're laughing at the situation or just laughing at ourselves, it can lighten things up enough just for us to appreciate what's going on, okay? And get a better perspective. So, thankfulness. Let me talk about thankfulness for just a minute. You know, this doesn't seem like a time to be thankful, does it? No. But you know what God has to say about it. I'm going to read the verses to you anyway. It's from 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. And I've always appreciated these verses so much. You know, when, if somebody were to say, what's the shortest verse in the Bible? People always say Jesus wept, right? That's just the verse that people go to, Jesus wept. But you know what? There's some other really short and powerful verses in the Bible that we need to hone in on, okay? And these are them. And this one says, rejoice evermore. Rejoice evermore. We should be rejoicing. This is a time to celebrate life and enjoy the time with our family. 2, verse 17 says, pray without ceasing. This is definitely a time for prayer. Prayer not just for ourselves or our children, our family, prayer for our churches, pray for our communities, pray for our countries, and pray for this whole world. We need to be in prayer, praying for the doctors and nurses and those frontline people who are working so hard behind the scenes, praying for those people in our grocery stores and the ones who are still out doing service for others. It is a time for prayer. And this is something, again, you can be doing with your children. Be a great way during the day to spend time praying with them. You know, when they're having anxiety and worries, sit down and say, let's talk about it. We should pray about this, right? You are modeling this for your children. And the last thing here that I want to share with you, verse 18 says, and in everything, give thanks. Yes, even during this time, we can be thankful. And yes, even during this time, we can teach our children to be thankful, right? Now, I saw recently, I was hoping Tina would be on here because I think she's the one who shared it. By the way, I do see all you ladies on here. I see Gail and Anna and Denise. Thank you for joining me. You know, Tina shared something. It was an idea of a jar. Oh, I don't have my jar now, but a jar. And you see this sometimes, like for New Year's, people like to start a jar at the beginning of the year and put all the things they're thankful for in it, right? Okay, which is a great thing to do, and we can do that during this time. But this idea came about as an idea of when your children are really missing something. Let's say they really want to go to the park and they're not understanding why they can't go and meet their friends at the park, right? Or say they want to go visit someone at their house. They don't understand why they can't go there. Or they really want McDonald's and why can't we go? You know, all these things that are normal things in our life today, you know, but we can't do them now. Something you could do is you could have a jar and you could write that little thing down on a piece of paper and stick it into the jar. And then once this quarantine or self-isolation or whatever we want to call this time is lifted and we're able to get back to our normal things, you could go through that jar and say, hey, guess what? We can finally go to the park. And you know what will happen? At first when I heard this, I thought, this is instilling them discontent, putting it in there for later, thinking I'm going to have this later. But actually what it will do, one, it helps them realize, okay, my mom's heard me. I'm writing this down. I'm going to put it in a jar. I can't do it now, but there's hope for the future. Everybody needs hope. And for your kids, that is a source of hope, right? But secondly, what it will do is later help them appreciate it and practice thankfulness. Because what used to be, let's just stop at McDonald's on the way home, it's now afterwards going to be like, we can actually go to McDonald's today, or we can go to the park today, or you can go see that friend you wanted to see. You know, it's a way of learning to be grateful for the things we have in our life. So again, I want to encourage you, if this is something that you feel like your kids would benefit from, or even you know, some of you might be missing getting your nails done or whatever, you could put that in the jar and like, I can't get my nails done. But you know what? There's hope for the future, right? So that might be something you want to practice with your kids, okay? But thankfulness is a great way to help bring perspective in our life and to help us be able to face every day the way God would have us to do. And then the last thing I want to talk about is contentment. You know, contentment during this time, I think can be hard, but in some ways, I personally am finding it very easy to be content because all the options are removed from me. There are no choices left. And I find for myself, when I have too many choices, that is actually what creates discontentment. There's too many things I could do, or too many things I want that I could have, you know, or just too many whatever. Lack of choices is better for me because I don't have to be discontent. It's not a choice, you know, but I know other people are really having a struggle with this because they miss their normal lives and they are not satisfied with where they are right now. And we need to teach our children how to be content, right? And you know the verse in Philippians chapter 4. Philippians 4, honestly, this might be the chapter that you need to read every day. You know, you can read Psalms every day during this time, and also Philippians 4 really talks about our mindset and how we need to be thinking as Christians, as women of faith. So Philippians 4:11 says, not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. You know, whatsoever state, this is one of those whatsoever states, right? Learning to be content, even in this state. Okay, so as I close, hi Ginger, thanks for joining, honey. I just want to encourage you to sit down when you get a quiet moment tonight. Write down some of your priorities. Write down some things that you really wish you could get accomplished. And then plot out a way to get it done. Okay? And then set up a rhythm to your day. If you haven't gotten into some kind of rhythm yet, work on that. You know, get up around a certain time. Have breakfast with your children. You know what? If you're one that normally just gives your kids cereal and toast, maybe now's the time to give them a hot breakfast. You know, make some bacon and eggs. Make those waffles. Make those pancakes that you never have time for. Whatever it is, you have time to do these things. Let your kids help you. They love mixing batter. You know what? And they might make a mess. But you know what? we now have time to clean it up, right? Or even better yet, we can teach them how to clean up after themselves. But don't be in a rush, but get some rhythm to your day. Spend time, get up, have breakfast with them, read with them, help them do their work, and spend your afternoons playing games with them in other ways that you can instill not just lessons like math and reading and spelling, but you can also instill joy in the journey, right? Have fun together. Create those magical memories that this time is affording us. And above all else, your mind saying, I'm losing you. My thing is now saying it's not saying I'm out of time. To finish now. Thank you for joining me. I hope this has been an encouragement for you. I'll be honest with you, it's been an encouragement for me. So I'm glad I've been able to do this. And I hope that you have a wonderful day. And I will come back again probably on Friday or Saturday. Saturday is actually my birthday. But I think I will spend my birthday talking to you. So I'll see you later. I'll put it up on the Sisters to Sisters page when I'll be back. But I think it'll be probably on Saturday. Okay? See you later, guys. Bye.